Hello, welcome to Bite Size Med. Now, I usually make videos on human biology and the basic medical sciences, but today I'm going to do something a little different and talk about 5 things that helped me study during medical school. Now, these may not be for everyone, but they did work for me, so I'm hoping they can help someone out there. The first thing is filtering out the information. It's no secret that the books in medical school are pretty dense with information. And reading and trying to remember everything from cover to cover, for me, that's unrealistic. So, a helpful skill is figuring out what you need and what you don't. In other words, what's high yield from the information that you're studying. Now, the simplest way to figure that out is in a class. Lectures would obviously focus on that, and notes from that lecture would definitely highlight that. But sometimes you find yourself stuck studying on your own. Maybe you missed a class, or the class didn't happen, or it happened and you're still lost. Then what do you do? For me, 2 things help determine what's high yield. One is obvious, things that get tested on an exam. Those are fairly easy to find out. You've got question banks, review books, a whole plethora of resources. These can guide you as to what information you should be paying extra attention to. I would never use these as a primary study resource. They are just meant to supplement a textbook. But there are other things that are important as well, and those are high yield from a learning and application point of view. Now, these things do get tested as well, but a lot of times they get missed. Something that helps you understand the information better, or something that you're going to use later on. These are like general concepts that we sometimes overlook since they're not going to show up on an exam. We memorize the clinical application without knowing the concept behind it, but doing that can create obstacles to learning later on. So I like jotting those down as well because, yes, I am a note taker. I like making notes, and one of the reasons was it helped me filter out information like this. Now, this is probably the only process for which I'd use a highlighter. But just reading, highlighting, and then revising the same thing again is quite tedious, and it would take me too many rounds of revisions to even remember anything. That's why I find it's important to make the study process active. And also, instead of passively rereading the same thing again during revisions, the recall process has to be active as well. How I do that is simply by using questions at both stages, questions to learn and questions to retrieve. And that's how I make my studying active. Now, like I mentioned before, I am a note taker, and obviously there are tons of different ways to study. But since I do take notes, I usually draw maps. Different pieces of information, they get linked with arrows. The arrows are the questions, like why, how, what. And the whole thing helps connect the information as opposed to just writing it out under headings and titles like the way a textbook is arranged. It also helps me bring in stuff from topics I've studied elsewhere, if they're linked to this, because one of the things that has helped me a lot is making connections between different topics. Now, these questions, they not only help me create this kind of concept map, but I use them again to recreate the map when I try to retrieve the information later on at intervals. So, the revision method that actually worked for me is more of testing how well I remember it by trying to recreate this map at different intervals of time. So, spaced repetition. This kind of testing helps me figure out where I'm making mistakes. I can correct them, and I actually remember that piece of information better after having corrected it. I can fill in gaps where I've forgotten things and try to find better ways to remember them. Another way this helps is since I repeat it over time, and I'm obviously going to be studying and learning other things over the same time period, I find some connections between topics that I didn't know was there before. That just reinforces my ability to remember it by making connections. So, I've mentioned making connections a lot, and there are different ways to do that. The most obvious ones that we form are the connections between the basic sciences and their applications in the clinical subjects. That's because all of medicine is connected. It's really more of one giant subject. But I'm actually talking about the small connections between topics. It's easy to find a connection between 2 things when they're similar. So by remembering one, it helps remember the other one as well. but topics can be connected by their differences too, and that's something that's helped me a lot. So I study by making comparisons, both similarities and differences. You know those giant tabular columns in textbooks that have so many rows and columns? It feels overwhelming just looking at them. Those. But breaking it up and making it your own. Again, taking what you need and leaving the rest from an existing table, or sometimes creating your own table. These are very useful for things that sound similar, and there are lots of those in microbiology, pharmacology, and every subject really. In the clinical subject, it's also useful for differential diagnoses, conditions that are similar but need to be differentiated. Whether it's an organism or a clinical condition, I start with one and read it thoroughly. Using the questions, I start listing down the key features one after the other. Once I'm done with that, I'll move on to the next one and compare it row by row to the first until the second column is created, and then the third. So, by doing it like this, I've taken my time to create my own table that again is easy to recreate when I need to recall it. These tables are useful for when I've forgotten everything about one topic, but I do remember another. So, by making a connection through the similarities and differences, it helps me remember things. Diagrams. Now, drawing is a wonderful way to remember things, and now they don't have to be intricate pieces of art. That's why these kinds of simple diagrams and schematic diagrams exist. Just a bunch of simple shapes. If you've got to draw a diagram as a part of your exam, obviously having done it a few times beforehand helps. But even if you don't have to do this in an exam, pictures are easier to remember than pages of words. Diagrams, they can help condense a lot of information into a small picture. And like I said, making them schematic helps. Simple drawing and marking up all the parts versus listing out the same information. Instead, we could put the lists into the picture. Also, I find that taking my time while drawing it the first time, really paying attention to the different components of the picture rather than quickly scribbling it out, helps me remember it better. But then during my recall process, it's going to be all scribbles. Now, most of the diagrams would be the kind of stuff that you do see in textbooks, but sometimes you can get a little creative and just doodle stuff out to remember things. I personally like doing things like this. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is one of the things that helps me the most, and it's the most obvious of my list. Make it bite sized, hence the name of my channel. It can get really overwhelming looking at the number of books and the tiny fonts that extend for endless number of pages in each book. But what helps is perspective and taking it one topic at a time. Even that topic needs to be broken down and then broken down again. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You study each piece and they fit all together. Before you know it, you've got the whole picture. Yes, there are always going to be gaps from missing pieces, but you'll get most of it. And this is how I start studying any topic. I skim through it and I make a checklist of all the things I need to know in this topic. Maybe there are some basic things that I need to recall before I can understand this topic. That's an opportunity to train my brain to actively recall it again. But they all get added to the list. And then I start reading and learning them and checking them off one by one, focusing on just one item on the list at a time. And this habit of mine helped me in every subject, and it's one that has never let me down. So, those are 5 things that helped me while studying. If you'd like to hear more, let me know in the comment section below. What are some of the troubles you face while studying, and what are the different methods that you use? I'd love to hear them so I can make more focused videos for all of you based on what I've done. If this video was helpful, you can give it a like and check out some of my other videos to see if they can help you too. Thanks for watching and happy studying.